Okay, great. Okay, welcome everyone to week 8, our live session 8. So we'll begin with a review of the quiz questions from last week. So this first question firstly asks you to read this blog and then take a look at this code, right? So we want to count the unique digits in the string, and the AI suggestion has used the is digit method, right? And this blog is telling you the difference between is digit, is numeric, and is decimal, and all of these seem reasonable. And when you read the blog, you would have found this helpful table, right? And it gives you, if you're talking about basic numbers, then all of the methods recognize that, each one of these is a decimal digit. It's also a digit according to this method. It's also numeric, right? But it gives you examples of, if I have fractions and superscripts and so on, then is decimal returns false, but is digit returns true, right? And if I have some Roman numerals, for example, and there are other things that fall into this category, then these first two, is decimal and is digit, say false, but is numeric says true, right? So I was sharing this as an example, right, of how careful you need to be and not blindly trust AI suggestions, right? So it turns out our client wants a certain behavior, right? So in this string where there's a normal digit, they want it to have one unique digit. In this one, which has a superscript 2, right? So we talked about superscripts over here. There also they want it to be a digit, right? So clearly they cannot want the is decimal behavior, because is decimal will return false for superscripts, right? It will recognize the leading two as as a decimal digit, but the superscript 2 it won't recognize, right? So that cannot be corrected in order to match the behavior that the client wants, right? Uh, this string, the normal digit 5 appears twice, so the number of unique digits is 1. In this case, this is the letter V, and in this case, this is the Roman letter V. It's very, very tricky to see that they're actually different, but one of them is a regular V, one of them is a Roman V. So this is exercising this particular behavior, right? So because of the fact that all of these are different, and these examples illustrate that, my hope was that you would be able to read this blog post. Somebody has put together this helpful resource. It's so easy to confuse is digit, is numeric, is decimal, right? The names are unfortunately rather poor, right? They don't fully capture this distinction. I often find I have to read this particular blog or something like it to remind myself, okay, in this case, what do I want? Do I want the is decimal, or do I want the is numeric, or do I want the is digit? It's very, very confusing, right? So the given code uses is digit, and is digit will not recognize this superscript, or beg your pardon, is digit will recognize the superscript 2, but it will not recognize this Roman numeral, right? So it cannot be no changes, right? That will be a problem, because then it won't handle this last case. What if I replace it with is numeric? That turns out to work, at least for all the examples that the client wants. It seems like they want the is numeric behavior. Is decimal will make things worse, because it will also not work for this, right? It'll fail for this case with the Roman 5, and it will also fail in the superscript case, right? And similarly with this test, which it will just check for digits in the range 0 to 9. Okay. Um, and changing the set with a list or a tuple won't help, because we want unique digits, and then that will not work over here, right? Okay, so as I said, the skill here was being able to read some helpful guidelines, understand therefore what we want, and in this case, I hope it was something that you were able to do. It required some thinking, right? I want to clarify that this is the type of question that I would not be able to ask on the exam for this course, because this requires you to read some other documentation and have that knowledge, right? Obviously, I don't expect you to memorize the subtle distinction between is decimal, is digit, and is numeric. But the main thing I wanted you to get from this exercise is that you can have these kinds of subtleties in Python or in any other language. So somewhere there is documentation, and somewhere you may have to read that documentation and understand, okay, for my application, for my problem, what I'm working on, I need this kind of behavior, right? Maybe you need some behavior that is not available as some sort of default behavior. So you may have to use some other combination. For example, let us say the client wanted to accept superscripts, but did not want to accept Roman numerals. But they still wanted to do something else that is numeric says yes to, but is digit says no to. So it could be that none of these was exactly what the client wanted, right? So this is where asking the client becomes so important, right? So I hope this was clear, why that everyone is okay with the explanation for why this particular question had this answer. Okay. So moving on to question two. Now we're starting to understand a little bit of C programming, and your friend has written some code. uh, Notice the word should, right? So all changes that your friend should make to improve this program, right? This program will actually compile, it will run, it will print something, right? It will print x is equal to 0. So it does something, right? But there are some changes that that someone should do to make it a better C program, right? And so let's go through the answers first and then see why anything else might not be correct, right? So firstly, we should hash include the stdio.h. This is a header file which has standard input output. We need this because we plan to use the printf function, right? So I said that, you know, this is a change that should be made. Depending on the system that you're running, uh, you could actually run this C code without hash including it. So for example, if any of you tried running this code on Python Tutor, it actually runs because Python Tutor, again, is meant for beginners. So I think they just kind of hash include stdio.h for you automatically. I'm not 100% sure of that. But there are other systems where you will try and compile this code, and the C compiler will say, look, I don't know what printf is, so I'm not going to give you the executable code. I won't be able to complete the compilation for you. So in any case, you will need to add stdio.h, right? I mean, at any rate, that is at least a good to do, and in some cases, it's a must do. Okay, so it includes should. Okay. The lecture notes describe how writing void main is actually incorrect. In case you have come across textbooks that say that, that's a bad textbook. The author should correct that. In C, we write int main, and then we have that function return 0 by default to indicate that everything ran correctly, right? Again, a should do, not must do, but should do, is we put new lines at the end of every print statement. Python does this for us automatically. But this is a nice thing to do. Otherwise, if you try running this code, you'll see it looks very ugly. It does. It's very hard to see where this line ends and the next one begins. So we put our new lines. We have to put it manually in C, but Python, for example, the print statement adds the new line for us automatically, right? Most of the other suggestions were incorrect because this is more like the Python syntax, right? This arrow notation. Remember, in C, we put the return type in the front. We write int main, and we don't write something like this, right? This is not correct syntax at all, right? This x is equal to 0 has to be written this way, int x equal to 0. It's incorrect to write it like this or like this. Both of these are kind of like Pythonish syntaxes. In Python, remember, if I just say x is equal to 0, this label is attached to this integer object. So the fact that this object is an integer is what tells you that type of x is an int, right? Because x is currently labeling this integer object. In contrast, when you write C code, you have to say x is equal to 0, but it won't automatically figure out the type. You have to say int x is equal to 0. Okay, so this is important too. clarify that you have to declare the type of your variable yourself. Okay. In this week's material, you might also see, for example, that if I have x equal to 0, this doesn't have to be an int. For example, it could be the type car, which is short for character, an individual letter. Even there, you can say car x equal to 0, and that is technically legal in C. Okay. So we have to declare, if we want an integer, we have to say it the way it's given. None of these options will work, right? And then the printf option was here, right? If we want to put a new line, this won't work because we have to say x is some decimal, and then we have to say what the value of the value variable is that you want to have printed. So you would have to say comma x. So this is the correct syntax for doing it. And then, as we said, we want to return 0. Okay. So this was hopefully taking you through the reminding you of some of the details that we discussed in the lecture, right? So Nitish had, I think, a partial question. Nitish, you were going to ask a question. You were, as we write int main, correct? So we do have that, and then return 0. That is absolutely correct. So that is good C programming style, right? And there the return 0 is telling us that the okay, the meaning is that this program terminated normally, right? So the main function is expected to return an integer, and programmers have agreed that this program should return the special integer value 0 to indicate that everything ended normally. In the lecture videos, you will see at some point some C code where we don't return 0. We are not returning 0 because we want to actually indicate that something bad happened, right? So by saying that our C function, our main function returns an integer, this is giving us a way to tell the operating system, right, that is actually running our program, look, my program ran successfully, or no, it didn't run successfully, right? So I hope I just answered the question that you had. So remember, the program is being run by your operating system. On my laptop, my operating system is Windows. But on my laptop, I can also run the Linux operating system. Somebody else might have the Mac operating system, right? So in any case, whatever code that we run, the operating system is the one that is actually running it. You can think of the operating system as this super boss, and your program or my program has to take permission from the super boss, the operating system, before it can run. This Zoom program that I'm running, on which we are talking, that has also taken permission from the super boss, right? You open a browser, that browser is a program that is taking permission from the super boss, the operating system. All these programs that you and I write or use, all of them, when they finish, they return a special integer value to the operating system, and that value is 0 if the program ends normally. And that value is non-zero, some sort of error code, if the program ends in an abnormal or unexpected way. Okay, so this is a great question you've asked, Nitish. I hope it's clear. This is why in C code, our main function returns an int, right? Now, in Python, we don't do this. Our programs, our Python programs, just return 0 by default, but we have another way of raising these error messages that we typically use in Python. You can also make your Python code exit with a non-zero value. So you can look this up. You'll have to import the sys module, SYS, which we saw in one of our early lectures when we were exploring floating point numbers. So you'll have to import sys, and then you can say sys.exit, and you can give it some non-zero value over there. So you can kind of behave like C code. Okay, good. All right. So this was, as I said, fairly straightforward code comprehension question, right? So I think Nitish had a further question. Int main then should not include return 0, instead int main. I'm not entirely sure, Nitish, what you meant by that. So we're saying that our function must return an integer, and that integer must be 0 if the function ends normally, right? Here, Hopefully our code didn't do anything bad. It just declared a variable, initialized it to 0, printed as value, and then it's ready to finish. So here we should put return 0. Okay. If it still isn't clear, please do ask another question on the chat. Okay. Um, quiz question 3 was saying, your friend has translated this Python code into this C code. Remember what we had said in the lecture? When you are learning a new programming language, the biggest danger is that we have understood how some things work in our language. So we're most comfortable with Python. We've spent a lot of time talking about integers in Python. Now we see exactly the same word in C, and it's so natural to think, the int we see in Python, that's just the same as the int we see in C, right? It's the same word. So we think it means the same thing, right? And what this example is showing you is that just because the term means the same, it looks the same, it doesn't mean it has the same meaning or semantics. Just because the syntax is the same doesn't mean the semantics are the same, the meaning, right? So most of this translation looks very nice, right? But then you will find that this Python code works clearly if for 12 factorial and 13 factorial. And if you use a calculator, you'll find that 12 factorial is just under half a billion, right? So 479 million, et cetera, right? And then if you used a scientific calculator to calculate factorial of 13, you would find that that is much larger, right? So that is more like 6 billion, right? Now, even though the word int here and the word int here look the same, in C, there is a limitation on how large integers can be. And that limitation in C is on most systems that you will encounter, including on Python Tutor. That system is the upper limit is about 2 billion, right? So integers in C can be roughly in the range minus 2 billion to plus 2 billion. So if you try to calculate 13 factorial, right, then you will get a different answer. 12 factorial will work, but 13 factorial will not work, right? It will overflow. The answer 6 billion is too large to be represented as an integer in C, and therefore it will be you will get some illegal answer, right? So again, you should try it out. Try running this C function with n equal to 13, and you will find that some calculations happen. The recursion works the way you're expecting to, but at some point when it finishes multiplying 13 times 12 times 11 and all that, it becomes too large a number to represent as an int, and then the number that gets printed is actually incorrect, right? Now, the question did say that you can't run this code directly. You do have to fix the error in this line, right? So if you tried running the code, you would find that you can't just do printf, right? This seems like a very natural way of translating this line. In Python, we can just say print whatever expression we want. So we try to do the same thing. Of course, we call it printf, but there's some very hard to read error message, right? The error message, the runtime error is invalid read of size 1, and that is completely unclear what is going on, right? If you happen to scroll down in Python Tutor, you would have seen this warning message. And again, the warning message is telling you where the error is, but it's using all this technical terminology that initially will be very, very confusing. Now, this problem is well known in many programming languages. It's well known for the C programming language also, that these error messages are not at all beginner friendly. So in fact, a lot of researchers have tried saying, look, we want to teach our students using C, or we want to teach our students using Python, but we can't use the standard compilers or interpreters because they produce these very hard to read messages. So a lot of people have tried to do research in this space, trying to make these error messages much more readable, right? Let me see. There was a query or something on the chat, right? Um, Okay, Mohini wants to point out about assignment for question two has not been reevaluated after more than 3 weeks. So Mohini, we did try and request NPTEL. Unfortunately, that period has closed. So what we will do is we will have to do a manual intervention after the fact. So please remember, please note that we have taken that issue on board since on our side we didn't put in the request in time. NPTEL has told us that there's nothing they can do on their process, but we will have an opportunity to address this after the fact, right? So we will make sure that it doesn't impact your overall thing. We will have this moderation afterwards where we will factor in that the assignment for question two has to be effectively everybody has to be given full marks for that, right? So I'm sorry, it won't be reflecting on your dashboard, but we are fully aware of it and we will handle it after the fact. Okay. I hope that satisfies the concern you had. Okay. So therefore, in this case, as I said, the answer was 13, but the explanation was a little bit the error messages were very hard to understand. This is why I had suggested that you try and use this AI tutor. And later on, I'll talk a little bit more about Python Tutor towards the end of our session, right? Because the people who have developed Python Tutor are really working hard to make sure that this tool is useful to all of you as learners. And so this is a fairly new addition that they had, this AI Tutor, right? Making use of LLMs. I'm not sure if any of you found it useful. I will point you towards the end for a place where you can share your feedback with the developers. I'm sure some of you have already seen there is a link on Python Tutor where you can share your feedback. But since I had requested you to use AI Tutor, if you have any feedback for the developers, it would be really nice if you could share that. I hope you found it generally useful, those of you who tried using it. If you didn't try using it, please do take a look at it. All right. Question four was again one of these questions where there is some Python code and there is some C code. And again, there is initially a problem with the C code, which you have to fix. You can use the AI tutor again, but then the code doesn't work, right? I mean, it looks like a fairly natural translation. We're counting how many digits there are, right, in a given integer. And this logic, hopefully, all of you were able to make sense of. How does it work? If n is negative, we don't want to count the minus sign, so we just make it minus n, right? Now, whatever value we have when we reach here is essentially like the absolute value of n, right? So these two lines could actually have just been written as something like n is equal to absolute value of n, but I wanted to do a clean translation into C, so I just left it like this if condition. Now, whatever number we have, it has at least one digit, right? Even if n is zero, there is at least one digit, namely zero, right? And we know for sure it's a non-negative number. So as long as the n is greater than or equal to 10, it has more digits. If it is greater than or equal to 0, but it is less than 10, then it's already only got one digit and we are ready to return the answer, right? So if n is strictly less than 10, we will come here and we will return the answer, the result, which is one digit, right? So this accumulator, this one, records the fact that we have at least one digit and we have accounted for that. Now, if there is more than one digit, then the number has to be greater than or equal to 10. Then increase this result by 1 and divide the number by 10. Remember, we use floor division over here, right? So we are using Python's floor division, right? Now, what our friend has done has tried to translate this almost line for line, right? Of course, they've done hash include. Of course, they've put brackets around this. This translates fairly neatly into C. The problem is over here, this floor division doesn't exist. In fact, this is a comment, right? So what happens is when the compiler reaches this line, line 10, it just sees n, and it doesn't even see a semicolon, right? So it says this is basically an incomplete sentence, and then you'll get a compiler error message. Once again, that compiler error message is not so easy to read, but hopefully the AI tutor helped you figure out, okay, basically this has to be written with a single slash. Now, I did tell you that in the lectures I mentioned that floor division and C's integer division, where you only have one slash, those two are not semantically the same. However, if the numbers involved are all positive, then it works out the same way, right? So by the time we reach this region of the code, we know n is not negative, because if n was negative, we would have already done minus n. And then this logic translates to this with, of course, this being a single slash. So at that point, C's integer division has the same meaning, has the same semantics as Python's floor division. Okay. In general, floor division of Python and integer division of C do not have the same semantics. But in this case, since the numbers involved n and the denominator 10 are both positive numbers, then it has the same semantics. Okay. So then this seems to work out, right? So then this should work. But nevertheless, there is a problem, and there is a problem because only some integers are representable, right? So here it was very, very tricky to work out the accepted answer, right? So the accepted answer was basically the least representable integer, right? I said in 32-bit integers, the range of representable integers is roughly -2 billion to +2 billion. And if you look at the smallest of those representable integers, the number that is approximately -2 billion, okay? So that number is negative. Then you try and say, okay, I want the negative of that. But unfortunately, the negative of the smallest representable integer is not the largest representable integer. It is larger than the largest representable integer. It is larger by 1. And so, very interestingly, in C, when you try and do this operation, where n happens to be the smallest representable integer, the most negative, you try and take the negative of that. Mathematically, that's a positive number, but that positive number is too big to represent in C, so it overflows and becomes a negative integer again. So the net effect is this does not change the number n if n is negative. And then for that number, it sets the result to 1. This condition is not true, so it immediately returns the result 1. So for that number, approximately -2 billion, right? The exact answer is shown here. That number is not going to produce the correct answer. The C code is going to think that that number has only a single digit in it, because that n, its negative cannot be represented, right? On the other hand, this Python code has no such problems. If you give it such as a large magnitude negative number, no problem. I can convert it into a large magnitude positive number in Python. So the same issue, int in Python, int in C, they mean different things. It's very, very important for you to keep in mind this point, that don't get confused because the syntax looks familiar. You are moving potentially to a different programming language. There, the syntax may be the same, but the meaning, the semantics might be quite different, and this can cause issues. Okay. So I hope this made sense. Please do ask if there are any doubts about this or any of the previous problems. Okay, so briefly to look ahead at week 8, this quiz 8. So there are going to be a couple of problems like this, where someone is wants to translate from C to Python in this case, or Python into C. Again, checking your understanding of the fluency across both those languages, right? Let me see. There were some questions on the chat. Where did that go? Okay, Nitish wants to clarify the n is equal to minus n. Right. So let's just take a quick look at that. In fact, Nitish, the best thing to do is to actually run this code in Python tutor with this negative number that's shown over here, right? I mean, so let me see. I somehow can't get rid of this Zoom floating thing. Let me move this to somewhere else. Oh, here we go. Right. So if you try it with this negative number, right, this is the smallest representable integer in C, assuming 32 bits int, right? Then try go to Python tutor and step through and see what happens. This if condition will be true. Why? Because obviously the n is negative, right? So if you use that value of n, it was negative. We'll come into line 5. Then we'll try to take the negative of that. So the negative of this you will think is just 2, 1, 4, 7, etc., all the way up to 6, 4, 8. But the maximum representable positive integer in C, 32-bit integer, is 214, etc., ending with 647. So if I try to remove this sign, 648 is more than 647. So that positive integer is not representable. So it will overflow in C and you will end up with the same number. So my point is that this line n is equal to minus n will have no effect if n is this number, right? This is the only number for which this will happen, right? Now, Vansh has said something interesting on the chat, right? So Vancha said, okay, this is a problem because we have int, and int is 32 bits, right? Or at least on this system in Python tutor, it's 32 bits. So Vancha has very rightly said, look, in C, you have other types. You have long, long, right? So Vancha is suggesting, let's just make the problem, just use the C code for long, long, right? Now, Vansh is absolutely right. It will then work for this number. But Vansh, I know you can see that the problem will just be delayed until we hit another bigger number, right? For that bigger number, for whatever the restriction is for that long, long type, we will have a similar issue, right? So in contrast, in Python, as long as my machine has enough memory to represent the super big integer that I want to work with, Python will let me work with the super big integer. In contrast, C says, okay, pick your type. Now you've chosen int, great. Now your range is minus 2 billion to plus 2 billion. Okay, you want to change it to long, long? Fine. But now your range is something else to something else. But it has to be within that range, right? So the suggestion that Vansh has made is an excellent one because it solves the immediate problem. But Vansh's suggestion doesn't solve the underlying issue that at some point this problem will still happen, right? So I hope that point is clear. Vansh, thank you for that suggestion because we were able to have this excellent clarification thanks to your inputs. Okay. Okay. Any other questions that we have here? This was important to have this discussion. Um, so Joy is saying even in Python, the same problem would occur. Okay, so in Python, the problem, yes, technically it will occur when you run out of memory, right? You're talking about a number that is so large that it cannot be represented in the limits of your particular computer, right? So it will definitely happen at some point, right? The only point is that it won't happen for a number that is fixed by the language. In C, the language tells us that if we're talking about 32-bit integers, then this is the range. And if we're talking about 64-bit integers, then we have this other range, right? So the problem will happen for every programming language on any system because eventually any system that we build is finite. We have only a finite number of atoms on this planet. Even if we become interplanetary, there are only a finite number of atoms in the whole universe. So at some point, there is some limit, right? But the point is that the language of Python doesn't say this is the limit ahead of time. Python just says, look, if your system has enough memory, Python will try and expand to use up all that memory to represent that number. Okay. In contrast, C has this limit. So at the very least, I want us to realize that translating this Python code into the C code where we've used int, because here also we used int, that is a difference, because here it's a very clear limit. Okay. Okay, Vansh wants to know, is there a method in C where we can remove the bits needed for negative numbers and use it for positive integers, right? Yes. So there is something called unsigned int. So there you can only represent non-negative values. The term unsigned int sounds a little bit different to non-negative. They really should have called it something like non-negative int or natural or something like that, right? But that will do the trick. Okay. Nikhil is saying, can't we use the heap because the heap has lots of memory? Yes, and in fact, Nicholas asked a very, very important point, right? So internally, Python can access lots and lots of memory, some of which is on the heap, right? So Python internally makes use of all that, and that is why it can potentially deal with large, very, very large numbers, right? It's not restricting those to the limits that C imposes, right? But even then, at some point, uh, you will run out of memory on the heap, right? So I think in this coming week's lecture, we talk about how, as a C programmer, you can access memory on the heap. The way you access memory on the heap is you request the operating system. You say, dear operating system, I would like some heap memory. And in C, there is this function called malloc, memory allocate, and there are some other variations of that, where you request memory. At some point, that request will be denied. The operating system will say, look, on this machine, I don't have any more memory to give you, right? So the same issue will happen at some point, but it's not restricted to the language itself, right? Okay. These are all great, great discussions. I know it has got quite technical, and I know some of you are interested in these technical issues. So this is really where we get to discuss this. Okay, so Meet Raman is saying, so why in Python do we write if name is equal to main for the main function and not directly main or something like that in C, C++, right? Okay, so again, this is a design choice in Python, right? Why not just write def main or something like that, right? And to the best of my knowledge, this is really the only kind of exception here. I could be wrong. Maybe there are other exceptions to this. So to the second part of your question, are there other functions similar to this in Python where it is written like this? To the best of my knowledge, we only use this kind of rather peculiar syntax for main, right? Now, and it's there for a reason, right? And I think I briefly touched on this in the lecture. If I wanted to make this function available as something that you can import into your code, right? Then by writing my testing code, like I'm trying to test this by trying what is it printing on -100, instead of de-indenting this code and just writing it directly in the global frame without this if condition, the danger there is then when you import my code, even these lines will get imported and then it will mess up your program. By writing it like this, I'm saying if Meet Raman's code is the main one and Meet Raman imports this module into the code, the own code, then this code will not be included because this will only work if name is main, and in that case, it's Meet Raman's code that has main. Meet Raman's code will be main. Okay, so only this code will be imported into that program, right? So this is just a way to safeguard against that and allow us to import code like this, right? Nikhil is asking a much more detailed question about Python classes. So Nikhil, in 8 weeks of this course, we haven't been able to discuss all of Python. In particular, we really didn't talk about classes in any depth. right? So this is something I will have to ask you to take another course that explains this later, right? This init kind of thing, right? So in this course, we're deliberately choosing not to discuss classes to keep it manageable in 8 weeks, right? Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very good to be curious, and I'm very glad all these questions people are asking. Today's session is really a delight with all the engagement. But as I said, unfortunately, given 8 weeks, we can only discuss certain things. Okay, good, good. I'm so happy that these examples triggered so many interesting conversations, right? Okay, so looking forward to this next week, as I said, there will be some of these questions. Once again, pay attention to important words like should not, cannot. I've highlighted them. On the exam, we will have at least one or two questions that are of a similar nature, right? So the C component of the exam will basically be restricted to this key point, right? That I want to translate from Python to C or C to Python, right? So keep this point in mind that certain things behave in a certain way in Python, they behave in a different way in C, right? So that is the most important thing I want us to keep in mind, right? So, for example, when you read the equivalent, I mean, watch the videos for this particular week, right? So, for example, this particular syntax in C. So, while SI, right? So, SI is, it turns out, the ith letter of a string S. So, what does it mean to say while letter? Right? Well, there's a notion of truthiness and falsiness in C, and the question is it the same notion of truthiness or falsiness in Python, right? So think about that, right? That particular issue about truthiness or falsiness is what's going to determine if it's okay to be translating that line into Python like this, right? So while SI, right? Again, I'm deliberately putting you in a position of saying, okay, look, the syntax looks so similar, no? It's almost the same thing. Of course, in C, I need to put brackets and I need to put these curly braces. In Python, I don't have to do that. So you see, I'm not putting the parentheses. I'm only putting the colon, right? So is that correct? So this is checking your understanding of, for example, truthiness, right? This notion that in Python, um, let's say for integers, any non-zero integer is treated like true. Only zero is treated like false, right? Similarly, in Python, for strings, any non-empty string is treated like true. Only the empty string is treated like false. Lists, similar idea. Empty list treated like false. Any non-empty list, including the list that contains the empty list, right? So a list that contains the empty list is a non-empty list because there is something inside it. The thing inside it is an empty list, but the outer list is non-empty. So the outer list is truthy, but an empty list by itself is falsy. It is treated like false. Um, this leads to code that is often very hard to read, especially for beginners, right? Many of us will look at this and say, while SI, what does that even mean? But unfortunately or fortunately, programmers have got comfortable with writing such code, and then as a result of that, there is a lot of code out there, right? So this has a particular meaning, and this code does something sensible in the C programming language, and this is really getting you to explore that, right? So please do practice these problems, in particular if you are going for the exam, because there will be such problems, right? Either Python to C, or in this case C to Python, or maybe one of each. So do practice these, right? Similarly, there will be some other problems, right? So after you are finished with quiz 8, I will be sharing a practice exam with you. Those of you who are interested in, especially those of you who are interested in taking the actual exam, will hopefully find that useful. As I mentioned last week, the practice exam, which will be available as a Google form, will be auto-graded, but with a very, very tough grading scheme, much more tough than what NPTEL will actually give you. So it'll give you like a sense of the questions, and like if it was graded very harshly, that would be my score. Your actual score will be better than that. So we will find time. I will work with the NPTEL team. We will find time to have another live session nearer your exam, where we will discuss solutions to that practice exam, and in general some exam test taking tips. Okay, so look out for after quiz 8 is the last week's assignment is finished. Look out for a practice exam. Of course, everyone who is interested in this is welcome to try it out. It's not restricted only to those of us who are taking the exam. Okay. So, lastly, before closing for this week, I wanted to just say a little bit about Python Tutor, right? So we've all used this tool. This is the professor who has actually developed Python Tutor. His name is Professor Philip Guo, and he is at a university in California, right? And I just happened to notice on Python Tutor, right? This point, right? Now, one of the really lovely things about doing an NPTEL course is we have so much diversity of students from all over the country, including potentially some international students, I don't know. But I'm sure somewhere there are some of you who are over 60 years old are interested in learning to code. So I just noticed there was this link. So if you are over 60 and you have used Python Tutor, maybe you want to fill in this Google form and write to Professor Philip Go and say, I'm interested in, sharing my experience of what it's like to use a tool like Python Tutor, what it's like to learn programming as an older adult, right? And there are other, in general, if you have feedback, like for example, I asked all of you to try AI Tutor. If you had some feedback on that, there is another survey for us to give feedback on. And just to let you know, like a real human being looks at this. So I actually filled in some suggestions. I think I told you in some of the lectures, I really love Python Tutor, but I'm so concerned that students will just like just click next like watching a movie, and they won't be thinking about, oh, what is actually going to happen, right? So what did I tell you in the lecture? I said, please don't just automatically click next, please imagine what is going to happen and only then click next, right? So in this survey, I filled this survey up and I said, it would be nice, Professor Go, if at some point you could make it a way where if I click next, it says, wait, first you tell me what's going to happen, then I will tell you. Python Tutor will tell you what is actually going to happen. So he actually responded to that and he said, oh, this is a good suggestion, and he's going to try and see if he's going to implement it. So maybe in a future version of Python Tutor, we will have access to that, right? So I just wanted to tell you, someone actually is reading this. This is not just, for the sake of putting it out there, right? And then those of you who are faculty who want to use this in your class, without the ads popping up and things like that, please get in touch. Again, I requested Professor Guo for this through this link, and I have been granted access to that version, right? Lastly, I wanted to just share with you. I mean, we reached out to Professor Go. He's actually agreed in principle to give a talk. I will try and reach out to you through NPTEL in case you're interested in his talk, since all of you have used this wonderful tool. So he will be giving a talk at some point. We have a webinar series which has not happened for a while, but we're hoping to revive it. And we're hoping that Professor Philip Go will be one of our speakers in the next iteration of these webinar series. And in general, if you're interested in computing education, I just wanted to share, in the same spirit, we have a conference in India. Many of the problems that we discuss are focused on challenges of learners in India. So if you're interested in research in this space, I just thought I would share this link with you. Okay, so this is mainly what I wanted to discuss. We are sort of 10 minutes early, so we have plenty of time for additional questions if anyone has. Please do ask. Okay. So if there aren't, uh, okay, Nikhil wants to know, is there any workshop? Nikhil, a workshop about what, if you can just clarify. And Vinayak wants to know, are there book recommendations for AI for beginners? Vinayak, there are lots of excellent resources for AI for beginners. What I would strongly, strongly suggest, if you are interested in understanding the sort of mathematical basis of AI, there are courses on NPTEL related to that. I would suggest looking at those courses. The other thing I would suggest is, if you're not interested in like understanding the mathematics, but you're much more interested in like applying AI, then I would suggest taking a look at building some tools. So I know, for example, there are some great tutorials out there. I think, for example, I mean, I'm not able to think of it immediately. Maybe someone else can. And anyway, there's great suggestions, I'm sure, through Google. My point is, if you're interested in applying your knowledge of AI tools, the best thing is not a book, but the best thing is some tutorials that will guide you to actually get you started in developing. Okay, so that is the general thing, right? So Vansh, for example, has suggested Free Code Camp, but there's probably lots of others, right? I was thinking about something else. So again, Pratik is suggesting the title of a book. Possibly, I haven't read that particular book, so there are probably good textbooks out there. My point is, if you're interested in the applied side of it, then it's best, in my suggestion, is best to actually get comfortable developing. One really, really important thing to keep in mind, again, with Gen AI, right? If you're using Gen AI to help you in your journey to explore AI in general, you understand certain concepts well. Like, okay, in general, I understand the distinction between supervised learning and unsupervised learning. I understand that in order to build a model, I have to do data cleaning and I have to do this, and these are the steps I have to do. So you learn from some resource. It could be a book, or it could be some tutorial. You learn some basic terminology, and you learn like a basic workflow. Then you can open up VS Code and start typing, and you just say, look, okay, I want to do these things, and basically I want to do this, and step one, I want to do this, and step two, I want to do that. And you will see that the AI itself will suggest step three and step four, and do you want to do this, and do you want to do that? Or it will make assumptions that you want to do step three like this. And then you say, no, 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 I actually want to do step three like this because I learned in this book that this is what AI is suggesting is a bad practice, or it doesn't work in the case that I'm working on. So my point is, you learn some general concepts from a book or from some tutorial, but then very quickly you start applying it to develop some interesting application, AI-based application, right? So this is what I would strongly suggest. Okay. Um, Nikhil had said, related to the question around workshops related to AI or Python, etc. By IISc, I'm not aware of something, Nikhil. If it is, it'll be posted on somebody's lab webpage or something like that, wherever they share this. I'm not 100% sure, right? There are always something is going on all the time at IISc, various other institutions. So look out for those. Okay. Okay. Um, let's see if there are more comments about the chat. Right. Joy wants to know, are there any live sessions after we complete week 8? Right. So Joy, as I said, I will definitely schedule at least one more live session, and that will be to discuss the practice exam. Right. In addition, I mean, especially after a live session like today, which was so interactive, I will certainly miss you all if I don't have more live sessions. So we'll try and see if we can schedule some more, but definitely at least one more to discuss the practice exam, right? Okay, Pratibha wants to know, do you think OpenAI models only suggest the scope of what we know, and if we don't know ourselves terminology, you haven't read it, they're difficult to continue with? Pratibha has asked a very, very important question, right? So Pratibha, it's a little bit like, I feel sometimes if I'm using Gen AI without knowing the concepts really well, I feel like a little bit like driving a car that is unfamiliar, and maybe a car that is very fast. I feel, oh, I can't control this car. It's zooming off in all these different directions, and I really can't control it, right? So I've never driven in such a powerful car. I only have a chutkusa little car, a small low powered car, and this is like a superpower car, right? So I really feel the best thing is to really get your concepts clear and then get into the pilot seat and let the co-pilot drive, and then you're watching the co-pilot saying how are you driving and things like that. But if you do it as a beginner, right, there is always this risk that it's going to drive too fast, it's going to go do crazy things that you don't know. So this is why throughout this course, I have been trying to get you to think in terms of, okay, pay attention to the co-pilot, pay attention to the AI, right? We have to learn to understand what is going. Then it won't feel like it's going out of control, right? But absolutely, if you use what I suggested without really understanding the concepts very well, you might easily feel out of control, right? And then you're like, oh, I don't know enough to criticize this or to critique or to refute this AI. And then you might start saying, okay, it must be correct, it must be correct, right? Of course, that is very, very dangerous to do. So I would not suggest you do it. What you can certainly do is if it produces some code that you don't understand, copy paste that code somewhere else into some chat GPT or something and say, look, I don't understand this, please explain it to me. And then you can make a judgment. Oh, okay. And you could say, oh, is it like that, right? This is something you can do, right? uh, the other thing I would suggest is if you haven't explored yet, ChatGPT has the study mode, right? Please do explore it. I will message it, I'll put it on the chat also. So study mode in ChatGPT, there at least it tries to say, okay, I'm not just going to give you like a big complicated answer, I'm going to try and break it down for you, etc., right? So so let's say two people have suggested that's worth trying. So if you have explored it, you might find that is useful to kind of slow it down, right? So maybe then, Pratibha, you will feel that your control is a little bit better if you use ChatGPT with study mode, and hopefully other people will make similar tools that are better for learners, right? So study mode is bad if all you're interested in is the answer, right? Because study mode will kind of make you say, wait, you should think about it, and it won't immediately give you the answer. But if you are genuinely interested in learning and you don't just want the answer, then it might be useful. Okay, so do explore it. Okay, excellent. This was so much fun. Thank you all for the interaction. If we are done, we can stop now. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye. Oh, wait, Nikhil has a question. I'm pursuing MCA AI and I took the course ML from IIT KGP. Didn't understand the maths and passed the exam. So how can I move? All right. This is very interesting, Nikhil, right? So somehow you passed, right? So, but you do feel you were given exposure to the basics. Now you maybe want to understand further, right? So firstly, I would say there are other courses online, including on NPTEL. Maybe you will find like a different explanation from somebody else might make it a little bit easier, right? So come back to the material one more time, right? The other thing is to actually identify, okay, in this case, I didn't understand this concept. And maybe you can find some help with ChatGPT study mode or other resources, right? One really nice thing, just I'm not a spokesperson for OpenAI or ChatGPT, but one thing I really like about these tools is if you want to study AI, then all these Gen AI developers have put lots of gyan about AI into their training data. So the answers in general around basic AI questions I have found are very high quality, in contrast to basic knowledge about other domains. So if you are interested in AI, and I know many of us are interested in AI, use tools like ChatGPT study mode to learn about AI. Use it to clarify your doubts from the Kharagpur course. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.